recording's sake?
Got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, you guys can see okay? Okay, fantastic. All right. Thank you all for being here this morning, this Sunday morning. I hope you guys got some good rest with the extra hour, a change in the time. This talk, I'm really indebted to nature for giving. I received this Dharma talk from being out in nature a couple of weeks ago, and I see it as part of a series of talks, actually. So one part of probably at least another or a third talk regarding lineage. And I want to thank, well, a couple of people. One is John Foote here for asking about who are the people in the lineage of our ancestors. Another point I want to make here is this year is the anniversary celebration of one of the founders of Soto Zen. His name was Keizan Jokin, and he wrote a book, a very creative, imaginative book about the Zen lineage called The Transmission of Light. And there's stories about teachers and their students that go from the Buddha all the way up to Zen Master Dogen in the 12th century. So about 1200 years of student-teacher relationship and the mythology that goes with that. But there's also lineage that extends beyond Dogen into the present moment. And who are the people in that series of lineage? What are their stories? So I'd like to expound a little bit on that in this series of talks. But for this one in particular, I want to highlight the importance of lineage, not just for Zen Buddhism, but for humanity. So let me begin with what I received from nature a couple of weeks ago when I was sitting out on a trail not too far from where I live in Ames, Iowa. You know, we think that, let me say first that we think that we need to go somewhere in order to be in nature. But that's not true. We can be in nature in this very moment. All we need is to open our sense gates, our ears, our eyes, our nose. Open them up, and you can be in nature in this very moment. And one of the best things that we can do for nature today is simply be aware of it. Right? Just be aware of it. Even in our very homes, nature exists. Nature is there, if you're aware. So as I was sitting on this trail, I noticed the leaves, many leaves falling down from the trees. Maybe you saw them over these past couple of weeks. And it was just quite a sight to behold. And I reflected for a moment that each one of those leaves is like, one leaf is like a life. It's like a life of a human being. It's my life. It's your life. And if we could make an analogy, the detachment of the leaf from the tree is like our birth, where we enter the world. And we feel a sense of separation and the anxiety that comes with that separation. And then we kind of travel through the air on our way down to the earth. And that could be symbolic of our death. And in between that birth and death is our life. And compared to what's around it, it's very, very short for one thing. That life of the leaf is so if we were to say that it begins with a detachment from the tree and ends with the return to the earth, so it's our life is just that quick. And every leaf absolutely matters. Every single one of those leaves has the entire universe in it. Right? Lineage is seeing that the leaf is part of a tree. Right? That tree, maybe it was around for 50 years. Maybe it's been around for 100 years. Maybe it's been around for 500 years or even 1,000 years. And so one leaf and the amount of time it takes to get down from the tree branch to the earth compared to the amount of time it took for the tree itself to get to that where it is. There's a vast difference there. You can count probably between 1 and 10 seconds the tree leaf falls to the earth. But the life of that tree might be 500,000, 2,000 years old. Think about the difference there. And when we can connect ourselves with the tree, with the lineage, what came before us, with the past, we won't have any of that anxiety that often results as thinking of ourselves as separate from the rest of the world, thinking of ourselves as isolated, separate individuals like little leaves. Just a leaf, right? Just a leaf. That leaf is connected to something that stems way, way back. And within that leaf is the energy of that tree that's been there for, in some cases, literally hundreds of years. All right? So this is an analogy to get us connected or thinking about the importance of lineage. And where does the leaf go? Right? It returns to the earth. We see it decompose back into the soil. The tree then takes up the energy from that soil, which includes the matter of the leaf. In the leaf is all the four elements. You've got fire, you've got the sun in that leaf. The sun is absolutely in that leaf, right? Think about photosynthesis. It takes it and absorbs the light from the sun before it's born, changes all kinds of beautiful colors, orange, red, yellow, purple, black spots, right? Changes all kinds of colors before it drops. It's like it's, doing its grand finale here. It has the rain, it has the water in it, right? Without the water, the tree couldn't be nourished. Of course, it's got the soil, the earth is in it. And the air, right? The air that gives space to it. All those four elements are found right in that leaf. And the same is true for us. We come from somewhere, right? We come from somewhere and we're going somewhere. This is, if we were to really connect with where we come from, we wouldn't have any kind of anxiety. I'm not saying that you will never have anxiety. I'm just saying that if we connect and when we connect with where we come from, if we see ourselves as part of a much larger tree that's been around for hundreds of thousands of years, we won't worry. All right? So the question of where do we come from? Where do you come from? There's many ways to respond to that particular question. There's many ways to think about it and to respond to it. But one way to think about this really spiritual question, where do I come from? In the koan story is asked, the teacher asked the student, where do you come from? Right, that's a koan for us. And one way of thinking about this question of where we come from is to think about our lineage. Who are your ancestors? Who are your ancestors? When I ask that particular question, who are your ancestors? Where do your thoughts go? Where do your thoughts go with that question? Who are your ancestors? How many generations back can you go in your own blood lineage? For me, until recently, it was only about 3 or 4 generations back that I could go. I could go to my parents, my grandparents, and up until recently, my great grandmother was the oldest living person that I knew in my blood lineage, and that was on my mother's side. So that was, that's 3 generations back. And I can think about some of the things that she had to deal with, and I know some of the stories behind how she came to the United States, for example, and what she did for a living, the fact that she spoke only Italian for her entire life, that she came at the age of 13 and died at the age of 98. She only could speak Italian, right? But I also know that she came from someplace deeper than that, and some of my spiritual roots come directly from her. I remember as a child, for example, I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and she would be ardently praying, and I never saw anybody pray like her before. Not outside of a church anyways. This was inside of a house. It was my parents didn't pray in that way. My father definitely not, bless him. And my mother, well, she had some of that as well. But I remember looking at her praying a rosary beads, holding these beads in her hand, and she looked up at me because she noticed me looking at her curiously, and her eyes just stung me. She gave me, she had such intensity in her eyes, it just stung me. That's part of my lineage. That's part of my blood lineage, also my spiritual lineage. But I didn't think much more about my lineage, or even that I come from somewhere, until I started practicing Zen with my teacher in central Pennsylvania at Mount Equity Zendo. I didn't start thinking about lineage until, and I didn't really take it very seriously at all until I had the practice every day with my teacher for almost 15 years. I mean, we didn't chant the lineage every day, but we chanted the lineage, this thing in Zen. If you stick around long enough, you know that there's a lineage. And we call it a lineage in Zen, that begins with actually we call them the 7 Buddhas before the present Buddha. All right, then there's the Buddha, and then there's the generations up to Bodhidharma, who transmitted Zen to China, and then there's a slew of ancestors that transmitted the Dharma from China through to Japan. And then most Zen temples in the United States and in Japan and elsewhere in the world, in Europe, South America, Central America, they chant a lineage that is based on either Zen Master Do. Well, it starts all the way from what I just mentioned, the 7 Buddhas before Buddha, Bodhidharma, all the way up to Dogen and Keizan, Zen Master Keizan, who is the one credited with writing the Denko Roku, this book of koans about the transmission of light. but the lineage continues after Keizan Jokin because he had several students, see? And he transmitted the Dharma to them, and they transmitted the Dharma to their students, and so on up to the present day. And so you have, as a result, many different lineages that all stem back to Zen Master Keizan in Japan. All the lineages today in Soto Zen stem back to Zen Master Keizan. So we chanted those names, and each lineage has its own particular teachers. Some of them, like for example, in my personal lineage that came from my teacher, Diane Banaj, she had her teacher, etc. And some of the teachers in my lineage overlap with the teachers at with Nonin's lineage, the lineage of Nebraska Zen Center. They go all the way up past Keizan Jokin and connect with other teachers, and then it splits off like the last 5 names or so. So the reason I'm mentioning this about lineage, about chanting the lineage, is because when I was doing it, after 3 or 4 years of doing that, it started to hit me like, this is important. There's something important about chanting these names that connects me back to the living Buddha. There's something really important about that. And I feel spiritually nourished and connected just simply by chanting those names, even if you don't know the stories behind them. I mean, knowing the stories really, it magnifies this connection. It magnifies this connection with the past in such a deep and beautiful way. But even just chanting the names regularly, I felt such a deep devotion welling up in me towards these teachers that managed to transmit the Dharma from one generation to the next for my benefit. And every day doing that. And I started to think about it, and I thought, I don't even know my own blood ancestors this well. And yet I can trace this lineage, this Zen lineage that I'm a part of, all the way back 2,500 years. And it started to make me think. And one day I went, I was visiting my family, my parents, and it's rough trying to share with your family something that you love that they don't understand, right? You know what I'm talking about. Right? When you fall in love with the Dharma, in this culture, it's very difficult to transmit that beyond those who have already fallen in love with it. It's difficult to transmit it to those, particularly our family members, if they don't understand where you're coming from and if we can't make the connections with them. But I wanted to, we desire, that's what the transmission is transmitting something beyond. It's not about Zen. It's not even about the Dharma. It's transmitting something much deeper, something beyond our comprehension, something that they already know. So I went to see my family, and I had this kind of somewhat brief conversation with my father. And I wanted to, I would have loved to be able to communicate this much more deeply with him. And, now that he's passed away, I feel like he's closer to me now than he has been before. And I feel like he's even with me right now. So I want to, this talk is also, in a sense, for him, and to continue that conversation that I had with him before he died. I asked him at that time, this must have been about 20 years ago now, I said to him, we don't even know our own ancestors, Dad. We don't even know our own ancestors. And to his credit, I have to say, he took my words up as a challenge, and he began to investigate my own ancestors on my father's side. And I learned and then like a few years later, I went to visit again, and I think we were in New Jersey or Pennsylvania somewhere, and he said, "Let's go on a canoe ride on the river here," and it's where the like, Pennsylvania New Jersey borders meet, and so it was nice. We packed a lunch. We went out there. We went out on the boat on a nice. It was like a warm sunny day. We were sitting out on there on a boat and on the river eating a lunch, and my father then starts talking to me about all this stuff that he found out about our ancestors that go back to Ireland. It was going back like 7 or 8 generations at least to the original McCabe that came from Ireland and Scotland um, to Haverstraw, New York, and settled there, and and on all this stuff. And I was really deeply touched, but even more so, I didn't understand what was happening at the time when he was sharing this with me. I almost took it for granted, but when I thought back on it, and even as I think back on it today, I'm just so grateful that he took up that challenge. I hope that I can do that for my son if he gives me a challenge like that when I get older. But in any case, there was something really deep about that, about that. And again, I talk about this to connect us with the importance of lineage and how that helps to break down this sense of anxiety, this all-pervading anxiety that we often fear. And I think it's oftentimes stemming from this sense of disconnection from our roots, from where we come from. And even just to think about it or to chant the names in the case of the Zen lineage can help us to reconnect with lineage and to reconnect with the sense like I come from somewhere, my blood ancestors, my spiritual ancestors, they come from somewhere. All right. Uh, and actually, so in the next talk I give, I want to talk a little bit about what it means to have spiritual ancestors. But for this one, just to kind of wrap it up a little bit, except for indigenous people, none of us, unless we have indigenous roots, none of us actually come from where we are presently at. Our roots go back to Europe, they go back to Africa, mine go back to Africa. I found that out through DNA testing. They go back to Asian cultures in this country, unless, of course, South America, right? Central America. But, here's the thing, in our country, our roots often get erased. They get erased really quickly because of the process of assimilation and how much as our immigrant ancestors wanted to adapt and had to adapt out of necessity, had to adapt. And so that oftentimes the roots, where we come from, got erased. Languages got erased. My mother was the last one who could speak Italian. And, today, she didn't transmit that language to us. It was part of a wider movement by to acculturate. And so, when we say, every time we say, check off a box that gives our identity as quote unquote white, we are erasing our heritage, our identity. And I'm not suggesting we don't, if you identify as white, I'm not saying don't identify that way. I'm just saying that when we check off that box, it's as though we're erasing a whole huge chunk of our identity. Our identity is much deeper, much broader than we give credit to often in our life. And so just to start us out on this particular part of this talk, I want to start us out by just having us think a little bit about our lineage. What does that word mean to you? What does lineage mean to you? How far back can you go? How does it make you feel to know that you come from somewhere, just as that leaf knows it comes from that great, majestic tree, right? In a future talk, I'd like to talk about a little bit about the um, ancestral lineage and what that means and how we can divide that lineage into three parts, into our blood lineage, our spiritual lineage, and our also non-human lineage. So that will be the next part of this talk. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, and if there's any questions or things you want to share that are connected to the talk, please feel free.
Dashi, this is Pam. I have a question. I really enjoy chanting the lineage. We've started doing it on Friday mornings. But how does it impact our feeling about that lineage to know the names that have been omitted or erased from it over time?
Well, so my feeling is that as far as the Zen lineage goes, one of the powerful point about it is that it is unbroken. It's unbroken from the present all the way through to the Buddha. So I don't have any, as far as that goes, I'm not, that doesn't affect, I still feel a strong sense. Even if the names now, I will say the names are, even if the names, even if it's a mythology, even if it's a mythology, even if there's some gaps in the lineage, I'm not concerned about that. That doesn't affect the fact that we chant the names. It's the spirit of it. It's the spirit behind it, right? Even if we can't identify all the names, even if we don't know all who's a part of it, still, it's the intention behind it.
But part of the intention is, the cultural intention to erase the female teachers from it.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And that's why and we can do this if you want. That's why some Zen centers have included the female ancestors as a part of their lineage chanting. And I would certainly, we can look to my teacher. We used to do the female ancestors with my teacher, and it wasn't exactly a lineage, because there wasn't this kind of teacher-student relationship from past to present in the same way that we have it with our lineage. With my teacher, we chanted several Indian Buddhist women names at the time that mostly existed at the time of the Buddha to acknowledge the female presence. And at San Francisco Zen Center, at Great Vow Monastery, and other places as well, they chant there's women ancestors. They usually start with a handful in India, then in China, and in Japan. And I am totally open and would welcome us to follow suit there and to chant the female ancestors that are part of our Zen school. So if you'd like, let me, I can do some, research there on which names there, I think this is probably open. Any one of us could look online at the sutra books of, say, San Francisco Zen Center or Great Vow and find all of the names that they're chanting.
I have a female lineage from Shuji that we would chant at just sit sometimes. It's just about as long as the male lineage as well. I could bring
Well,
that
there
up.
you go. There you go. So then, I'm totally open to us doing that at Nebraska Zen Center. I think it's a powerful practice. And I'll add too that my teacher is female, right? So she's part of the lineage as well. But you're right in saying this, showed you about the kind of erasure of women ancestors in the Zen lineage. So I think that's an important point. Yeah, and Shinkyu, if you want to send me that, I'd love to take a look at it. Maybe we can figure out, and especially since your teacher is you're studied so deeply with Nonin, that might be the way to go is using that particular lineage. But I'd love if you could send it to me. I'd love to see it. Maybe we can start incorporating it into the ceremony.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Great.
We currently have several women's names as part of the echo that we have done in the past after the,
Short though.
yeah,
Right?
short.
Very short.
Mhm.
There's a lot of great teachers too over the years that
Right, and there's a collection of koans called The Hidden Lamp. It's in a published book called The Hidden Lamp of women teachers. That's also really might be one to study. Um, so yeah, that'd be another way to connect with women teachers.
Anyone else? Questions? Comments?
I mean, I'll just say that it's not really a question, but it goes along with the idea of Sajiki. Just, we're not really, yeah, it's that idea of erasure almost. You're talking about Daishin, like ancestors. Like my grandmother grew up speaking French, but we didn't, she was the last one in her lineage that, like my father and his brothers and sisters never learned how to speak French. So it does feel very divorced from that whole Confucian idea of just this, we were set inside of a whole long string of ancestors just going all the way back. And sometimes I feel like I'm adrift. I think that one of the big reasons, not the only one, but that idea of lineage as well, right, was really brought me to Zen, like, wow, I'm actually part of this whole gigantic thing. Although I always have been, but the way we talk and think about it in the West, right, is just a little tiny dot, completely divorced from everything. It messed me up. I know I was.
Yeah, thank you, Shinky, for saying that your French ancestors and mine Italian, Gaelic. We didn't learn anything like that, and it really does mess us up. And it's not just. I want to suggest here that it's not just in Asian culture that there's this importance relegated to lineage. It's throughout human culture. And the example I would give is if you look in the Bible itself, there's examples of lineages, right? If you look in the Hebrew Bible, there's lineages written out that go back, and so there's this importance placed in Western culture on lineage, as well as in the New Testament. And it also, one of the other purposes of lineage is that it legitimizes whoever it is that, it legitimizes the tradition. So we have that sense in the West as well, but it's largely been erased from a lot of us. So thinking about it, connecting with it is powerful. It's healing, potentially very healing for us to know that we belong, that we're part of something much vaster than ourselves.
Yeah, if you've ever watched the show Finding Your Roots on PBS, the people involved in that are deeply, deeply moved by what they find out about their lineage in that show, often to tears.
Yeah. Wow.
I have a comment. My dad's done quite a bit of genealogical research, and it's interesting. We've traced it back to some blacksmiths who worked in like Jamestown or something. But they were not nice people. There's a whole book published about them. They were beating their wives were beating them. They were killing all the Native Americans constantly and getting into fights, and the Puritans couldn't do anything about it because they were the only ones who could be blacksmiths. But I guess say one thing about if our ancestors are not always great people. There's a lot of especially through the history of the American West and all the manifest destiny and there's
History of the American South.
the history of the American South. Yeah, there's not a lot of great stuff that our ancestors have been up to in the past.
Right, and this is part of, the second part of this talk will address some of what you just mentioned there, that we have both it's not an easy thing to go into, and just to acknowledge, okay, there's some folks and players in my lineage that may not be exemplars for me to follow, but we need to know that, right? We need to know that. And none of us has perfect ancestry. I mean, my father would talk about how the misdeeds of Norwegian people towards, particularly Vikings, and how they acted towards other lands where they conquered people. So we have that as well. And and what you mentioned, Mike, about how our ancestors were in the meeting with indigenous people here, that's an important piece of it too. But we don't want to, this is part of who we are, and we should know it,
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Like, what's the difference between acknowledging and like worshiping and praising? That's like a whole
Right, yeah. Right. Again, yeah, this is an important piece. And again, this is kind of edging into the next talk here, but there's both, right? There is the good and the bad, right? There's the good and bad, but let's go into that the next time around. And just to think about it, the very beginning is just to point your attention, your awareness. Where do we point our awareness? And one place we can point it is at lineage, and we know that there are good people. I'm not trying to erase the bad. We know that there are good people in our lineage, and that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. So just pointing our attention in that direction for right now. And then maybe we can get in next time into a little bit more of the weeds of that. And how to, what is quote unquote worship? I don't like that word, but what does that look like when it comes to our ancestors? How does that look, or how does that feel? How do we work with those that, we're not too proud of? And as well as with, of course, acknowledging the greatness too.
All right. Do we want to close the sessions?
Announcements?
Oh, announcements. That's right. So I'll just talk about the meditations we have real quick. Monday through Friday, 6 to like 7:15, 7:30 or so. We're in the temple, 2 periods of meditation, a little bit of walking meditation in between. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we do another half hour earlier than that. So from 5:30 to 6 with Daishin and everybody over at Zen Fields. That's both in person and online. The links are on the website. There's also Wednesday evening meditation from 6 to 7:30 or so. That's both in person and online, links on the website. And then also we have our typical Sunday service, which we're at right now, 10 to noon typically, but the last Sunday of the month, it's from 9:30 to like 11:30 or 11 or so, something like that. But you hang out afterwards anyway, so it ends up being much later, also on the website.
Just to add one other thing there on the schedule, if I may, and that is connected with this talk on lineage, and that is right now Zen Fields on Monday evenings. I don't think this interferes with anything at Nebraska Zen Center, but at Zen Fields, G-Show has been giving, and they've been talking about the Denko Roku, going through each of the stories of the ancestors in that collection. So anybody here is welcome to join us there at Zen Fields at 6 to 7:30 on Monday evenings.
I think that's on the calendar as
Yeah,
well,
yep.
with the Zoom link.
Yeah, okay, great, yeah.
And then this month, the 16th, is it?
Mhm.
The 15th to the 16th.
16.
The 16th, we will have Intro to Zen, led by Dai Shin here, I believe from noon to 3.
No, it's 9 to noon.
Oh, 9 to noon. Oh, I'm like thinking my preferred schedule.
morning.
Like 9 to 3 sounds kind of good. Yeah, sure, 9 to noon. Thank you. Info on the website, so if you haven't gone through that, and a lot of people have, but if you haven't, it's a pretty good, solid. I've sat through one myself. Highly recommended.
Yeah, and also if any of you are interested in learning, not just, I mean, maybe you have already done an intro to Zen, or maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, I recommend it, even if you're an experienced sitter, just to get a sense of how we introduce new people to the practice and how you might consider helping others to become aware of or comfortable even with practicing Zen. I live for Zazen, you know what? I want to teach it to as many people as possible. And Intro to Zen is a one way to do that. And if you share that feeling that you want to share the Dharma with others, come to Intro to Zen and help us to teach it, share your own perspective and then learn how to offer instruction for newcomers.
And then after Intro to Zen on the 16th, from 1 to 3 in the afternoon, we're going to have a Sangha workday. There's going to be lots of leaves falling, that we've been talking about,
Oh, yeah.
and plenty of, small tasks that we'd like people to come and help with for a couple hours on Saturday.
It's fun when there's so many people, too.
That's right.
Which day?
Pardon?
Which day?
It's the 16th.
Okay.
So it's Saturday after the morning Intro to Zen class.
Okay,
Yeah.
which
Wonderful.
is
Saturday the
like
16th.
noon-ish.
That goes until noon. This starts at 1 to 3.
1 to 3.
Time for lunch.
Okay.
Yeah. And that weather hopefully be nice and cool, not like the summer one was so sweaty.
And we should remind people about Rohatsu.
That's right.
Sesshin is coming at the beginning of December, so there should very soon be something on the website to sign up for that. It's a 5-day sesshin, but people can sign up for part or all of it.
What's a sesshin?
Pardon?
What's a sesshin?
It's a silent retreat, meditation retreat.
Highly recommended. If you haven't done it, even just to do an afternoon. I'm going to be joining from Friday to Sunday, so I can't do the whole thing. If you can, that's wonderful. But support the Sangha, come in when you can, come in for the evening even, like evening sitting. And just to sit in the atmosphere where there's a bunch of people sitting is just it's so nourishing to our spirit. So just really encourage you to even do some part of it during that time. And it's a special time of year. It's commemorating the enlightenment of the Buddha.
And Shuji might come up from Kansas? Or
Yeah, she still doesn't know about she won't know about the jury duty possible, that she'll have to,
Okay.
they have interviews and stuff, but yeah, it's kind of like, it's cutting up close, so she won't know.
The last thing I'll mention is we are having our quarterly board meeting after
That's right.
tea and conversation today, so anybody who wants to stay for that is welcome.
We chase you out
Oh, it's
otherwise.
potentially boring.
I think that's it. I don't have, so we wanna,
Should we move our cushions back and stand by
Oh.
them for
Okay.
a while?
if I can stand up.
May this merit extend universally to all, so that we, together with all beings, realize the Buddha way. All rest throughout space and time. All are one, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom.